Well, Brad, you could always go.
If we like Venezuela.
We're going to call this meeting. We're going to call this meeting to order. Our chair is MIA, inexplicably missing, and we just tried to call and we just get voicemail.
Is your mic on, Reb?
Speaking of the devil.
Or the angel is.
Change your chair.
I'm just going to slide down. Slide here.
While we're waiting for Jim to get here, I'm going to go ahead and read the purpose statement for the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority. The primary objective of the CAC is to ensure the capital maintenance of public transportation projects and programs approved by the voters during the November 6th, 2012 election and the November 2nd, 2004 elections are accomplished with PPRTA funds. This committee reports directly to the Board of Directors.
You're doing great, Reb. Keep it up. He was doing some tap dancing. You've been awesome. Sorry, Paul. Well, everybody okay? Based on the number of people that were coming in, I wasn't sure we were going to have a quorum.
A little louder.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure we were going to have a quorum based on the emails we got of the people who weren't coming, so I'm glad everybody's here. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. All right, we had the call to order established. Do I hear a move to approve the agenda as published?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? All right, public comment period for items not on the agenda. Yes, sir? Could you please identify yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Peterson, and I'm the director of the Colorado Asphalt Pavement Association. My cards are coming around. We're a resource organization to the pavers and partner with our agencies that are represented here. We work together on specs and design standards, and periodically there's questions that come up on materials and cost, capacity of the contractors. And so just wanted to let you know that we were greatly supportive of the PPRTA, from waving signs back in the day to making sure that we do what we say we're going to do so we can get it passed again in the future. So again, I just wanted to let you know that there's an organization that represents the paving contractors that meets regularly and periodically with your staff, Corey, Mike, and Jennifer, and those from the county. And we work together to make sure we're making the best investment in the limited dollar that you have with respects to our paving projects and the materials and the projects. And so unless there's any questions, thank you for allowing me just to identify who I am and who we represent. And with that.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I believe, if I remember correctly, you were here a few years ago, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure you're the same guy. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
What, if anything, do you, as an organization, have to do with the price control?
Question was on price control. We have no control on that. However, what we can do indirectly is if an agency comes to us and says, boy, we have $10 worth of paving and we only got $5. How can we make sure that we use our funds correctly? Well, that's where we work with the agency and say, boy, if you get your work out early, if you allow a flexible schedule to complete the work, if you have a get in, get out, and stay out approach versus these limited work hours, you only can work 6 hours a day, you can't work weekends. If you can use materials that are coming out of the plant versus exotic specialty type materials. If you have a let's work together and solve problems when we get on the jobs, those are the approaches that we've seen agencies, including the Springs and the county, used effectively to stretch the dollar. But in terms of us saying, boy, guys, here's the cap on, this isn't coming as China.
Any other questions? Oh, did you have?
Sir, is it public record?
Can't hear you.
Is it public record, the chip seal products that are being used around in municipalities and counties as well as CDOT?
Is it
They're
public
designed.
record? Yes. Yeah. The chip seal, what did you say, the requirements or the?
Yeah, they're specs.
Their specs, you bet. Every agency has standard specs for the materials. Often agencies will reference CDOT, but that's a kind of like referencing of a very vast program versus, boy, here's what we're looking for in material requirements and standards for construction. But there's a difference between a highway and city streets and county roads. So often we work with agencies to tailor their requirements to the smaller type traffic that they see, lower truck volumes, to ensure that they're not building a highway that on city streets. Often the distresses are durability related versus deformation from the heavy trucks. But every agency that requires chip seal has requirements for aggregates and wearing, and so those are publicly available.
Do they consult you? My experience in New Mexico, you literally have to know the area because the asphalt and the aggregates you have to work with are significantly different throughout the state. Some of it actually gets shipped from the east side of the state to the west so they can make some decent asphalt. Do these smaller agencies, do they consult you and ask for advice? Make their dollar go further?
They sure do. Yeah, and fortunately, we have had a quarterly coordination meeting with staff for 8-10 years, where we meet regularly. We've updated, implemented the Pikes Peak Region asphalt paving specification, and then we've worked together to enhance, update the pavement design manual. It's one thing what happens on the surface versus the design and subgrade. I think the smaller agencies, Manitou, Woodland Park, others, it's a little bit less structured, but we still interact with them as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tom? Thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming.
you bet. Thank you.
Continue the working with our agencies to stretch our dollars as far as we can get them.
Okay, sure will.
Any other public comment, Don?
I just wanted to clarify a question that was done last month about Kono's position on the Old North End transit. And our position is no position. We do not take sides or put ourselves in a position of a community who is divided. What we will do is we will offer our staff to mitigate and to handle the problems, so we don't take sides where there's that kind of division as it is in the North End.
Joan, did you catch the gist of that? Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the July 6th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
As presented?
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Financial reports.
Good afternoon. Beverly Mayeski, PPRTA Financial Director. As you can see, May we received $7,844,000, which was $746,000 above the budget. But the prior month we were only $189 above the budget. But $400,000 approximately in May would have normally been reported in April. It's a payment from the county through the state for license taxes, and it just didn't get into our submittal in time to give it to us in the prior months. So that kind of evens it out a little bit better between the 2 months. And we're $2.4 million ahead of budget for the year, and that's 7.4%. Now, the budget, this report was done for the board, and then I used the same report for you the next month, but now our budget is $89 million. So you'll see that reflected in the next report, because they literally approved it after this report, that budget, after this report came out. So that could be a little confusing, so. Anyway, compared to last year on the second page, we are $2 million ahead of last year's sales and use tax, or 6.12%. And then the rest of the reports are the revenue and expense report, and then the budget comparison reports, and those are the total costs to date compared to the total project budget. Are there any questions?
Questions for Bev on the reports?
If I can ask just one thing, we got a couple of financial handouts I know we'll be talking about later. Could you just kind of prep us on what?
I'm going to go right into that item now.
Sweet.
So, if there's no questions on the financials. Okay, great. Okay, so I passed out a bunch of reports, but this item is the capital renewal project revisions. And we know we're going to have total costs go up in the projects. So what we want to do is come up with a way that is a good process for getting approval through the CAC and the board for increases in total project costs. And so today, I mean, we don't have to come up with a recommendation for the board today, because this might take a couple meetings. But we'll get started with going back in history and talking about the first 10 years and how we handled costs going up in projects for the first 10-year projects. So the large rainbow spreadsheet that's got the colors on it, this is the initial A-list of capital projects. And the original cost was done well before the 2004 ballot in November. So on this sheet, you have the original cost estimate, and then the next column on the sheet are the final cost estimates. And in the end, we have a finite amount of money. We can't just increase them forever, but we try to come up with a way that makes sense. So each year in the first initial A-list, what we're doing is calculating an inflation factor. And a subcontractor did that for us, and it was Nolte. And they'd come up with an inflation factor, and the board either approved it or not. The CAC and the board either approved it or not. So between the original cost estimate column in 2016, there are other columns in this spreadsheet that are hidden. Because every year I would apply an inflation factor, and then a bunch of years we didn't have an inflation factor. We didn't deflate anything because we had a big drop in our sales and use tax and, drop in the economic outlook for everything. But that is how the original cost for all the 2004 projects went from $290 million to $383 million. So when entities then would get the inflation factor, or it was approved, each of the projects that had not been finished yet would get the inflation factor applied to it each year. And then once the project was finished, it no longer got the inflation factor because it was done. So that, and we were hopeful that we weren't inflating things so much that we didn't have the revenue to cover it. Of course, we were doing a little calculation to figure out whether we thought we had the revenue. It wasn't just blindly adding percentages. But that's what we did there for the first 10 years. And then what happened, though, with that wasn't ideal was that we'd do all these line item transfers when it was time to do a project, and then later line item transfer money back and back and forth and back and forth. And it was actually quite an exercise, and I'm not really sure how transparent it was. But on the second and third page, I used to try to document all the changes we made, which it worked out okay. We could still do something like that. We'd have to hire a firm to give us some inflationary numbers and that, but that costs money. So I'm not sure it was the best way to do it, but it was how we did it. And it worked okay. In the end, I think you remember, we tried to collect back funds because there were several projects that didn't have enough money to be completed, that were sitting in accounts, and they're not really sitting in accounts, but they're budgeted in accounts. So we tried to pull back some of the money that each of the member governments wasn't using to put in a pool, so that that money then could be allocated to the projects that were still left. And it was only moderately successful because there's still probably money sitting out there that isn't going to be utilized for projects that we're not recognizing could go towards either Mark Shuffle South or North or something. So anyway, that's the story on the first 10 years. Now the second 10 years is this sheet here that's shorter, and this will eventually be the rainbow spreadsheet once we get done with some of these projects. And the original cost estimate was done in 2012, and it was done using a calculation that assumed, and everything's been straight line so far, with no inflation as far as the revenue side of it. So in 2012, it was assumed that $69 million would be the revenue and 55% of it would go to capital. Then the member governments worked together to come up with this list that went, the A list and the B list, that went on the ballot measure language, and it went through several passes through the CAC and the board. I think some of you will probably remember some of those meetings. Then, so the original cost estimate was probably done in 2011, 2012, and the group of projects was decided through a lot of different meetings between the different staffs and then the CAC and the board, and probably some general meetings that they had with the general public, I think, as I recall. I wasn't that involved in that part. We would just see it come forward to the CAC and the board. But anyway, so then we're going to have to come up with a good way to do proposed revised cost estimates. And there's quite a few ways we could probably do it. I've heard concerns, different kind of concerns about just increasing costs across the board for every project, and yet if you do projects that aren't started yet and add money to them, I mean, what do you really know about that project? So El Paso County wants to wait till they have a good sense of how much some of the projects will increase. And that's one way to do it. And then some of the city has already asked for increases, and they call them line item transfers. But the old line item transfers in here reduced a project when it transferred money. When they were asking for line item transfers, they were only reducing their budget for the year. They weren't really telling you that they're reducing the total project costs. Now, So in accounting terms, if we didn't have additional revenue, that would be a problem. But we do have additional revenue. So this is just an opportunity to figure out how we want to do this going forward. It's really not a problem yet. That's why we're addressing it right now. So the yellow ones they requested in prior budget documents, the yellow numbers on here that are highlighted in yellow. And the blue, they're kind of saying right now, this is what we think now. And today really isn't a time to approve these numbers per se, but to figure out how the CAC and the board wants to go about increasing total project costs across the board eventually. So Mike, though, put together a memo that talks about some of his projects. I asked him to do that and why some of them are increasing. And you can read this at your leisure, and Mike might want to come up and talk about it, depending on where this conversation goes today. One thing we could do, so we know that sales and use tax are $89 million now per year instead of $69 million. So they've increased 29%. Well, we know from experience, and we can kind of assume this, it's not 100% sure, but we'll probably have a downturn in the economy. And we won't know how bad or how long that'll last in this next 10 years. But when it hit in the first 10 years, it probably lasted 3 to 4 years of that 10 years. So, and it was a big drop. So then, going forward, we don't necessarily want to say, oh, we're going to just increase the total costs of the A-list by 29%, but maybe you want to come up with a percent, and each of the member governments gets a portion of the percentage based on the original cost estimate, but they don't have to apply it to every project yet because they're not ready to do that. And then we keep an eye on whether we're going to get that revenue or not. Now, this was designed to go to the B list in 7.5 years based on the $69 million revenue, based on the original estimates. So maybe if everything is still in line with revenue and costs, you could still make the B list after the A list is totally funded in 7.5 years. It was designed that way. Can't say that that'll happen. Let's hope it does. But there's not infinite dollars. So I just wanted to start the conversation there.
Tom first, and then
Bev, I'm looking at some of these numbers, and I was looking, one that caught my eye was the Baptist Road crossing went from 2.6 to 10.8 million. I think we have to be careful that some of that is probably construction cost and some of it is scope change. And I think on those ones that start to drive the numbers, I think we need more granularity, if you will, to find out what's really going on there to cause that to happen. Because some of those are decisions versus outside forces.
Right. Some scope does change both up and down. Cimarron Bridge, when it started, it was one of the first projects the RTA did, and it went up percentage-wise a lot more than, say, inflation. The bridge was done a little differently, a little nicer, but it was a definite decision made by the CAC and the board, probably a good decision. So it's not like we're revisiting decisions like that. They're made knowing the facts at the time. I would propose that we don't add a percentage to every project and then move the money around continuously because it becomes just a shell game. And since we don't really know what the scope of some of the projects are until you get a little closer to being in them, that we don't do that this time. But we also have to be fair and consider that I had a comment from one of the board members said, well, that's fine if you're the ones who are first into your projects, but what about the last project completed? We don't want to shortchange the projects towards the end, and they all have to kind of be less than they maybe would have been, a little smaller scope. And sometimes the smaller scope makes sense because it was, when it was put on this list, they thought that the growth would be in a certain area and there would be more need in an area that just didn't develop. So there's all sorts of reasons why some things went down and some things just didn't cost as much also. So there's all those things to consider.
It strikes me that there's a couple of factors going on. One is the revenue. And if the revenue is going up, you may want to look at how that compares to population changes also. Because if revenue goes up faster than population changes, then that would be a proxy for inflation.
Right.
Because all this money is coming in as sales tax. So if the population grows, let's say, at 5%, and the revenue grows at 7%, that difference would be a reasonable assumption for inflation. And so if you use that number in sort of to look at projects and say, if their changes are in the range of this kind of inflation, then we won't worry too much about it. However, if there is a scope change on a project, which they're going to happen, then that means that you have an alert that either other projects need to come in with a lower scope or some projects have to be lopped off the list. And that might help the planning process, because that's really all you're talking about is how to manage the planning process.
Correct. And
So just some thoughts.
one of the things is we don't have readily available population figures except every 10 years from the decennial census, which,
But they are
Can be a
projected
problem.
on a yearly basis.
okay.
Not the census, but there is an American something or other thing that projects them every year.
We have some factors that are going to affect us that are legal factors based on whether some of these commercial sites can be taken out of the RTA, like the Walmart situation. If that happened to a lot of our bigger box stores along the state highways, it would really impact our revenue. And we have projects along those areas or in those areas that are still going to need to be completed and have been completed and need to be paid for over time. So that could affect this. Now, we'll have some kind of idea, hopefully sometime in September, as to how that might turn out. I mean, of course, things can always go into more litigation, but
Good comments from both of you guys. The quick question on hiring someone for inflation, it seems to me that there are agencies within the state, whether it's the Senate Budget Committee or the Governor's Committee or one of those folks, have a standard inflation rate that they apply to other state level stuff. And certainly there's enough information that I've read somewhere that there's an inflation factor for each county that generally.
this is more in line with when the report was done every year. It was the inflation factors for construction increases, both material, labor, and what area of the country. And so the firm that did it for us, Nolte, they compared a lot of things that had to do with just the construction, just in this area or in this state, for firms that were bidding on our type of projects.
Okay. The other comment, with when we're making decisions or making recommendations for the board to make decisions on cost of projects and this, that, and another, knowing that these projects were roughly designed, they're an engineering estimate, but these are already 4 years old. And so we're spending money against targets that are 4 years old that we know, in most cases, unless there's a downward scope change, they're going to be more than that. And so if we don't update them periodically, we end up with this huge pot of money, and now we're in a fist fight to try to figure out how to spend this huge pot of money against the projects. Or you end up, like you suggested, was that the first to the trough with the project gets the money, versus a distribution across the members at some percentage or semi-equitable means of doing so. But I think we're ill-advised to continue to make decisions based on four-year-old estimates. And so we need to find a way, whether it's every 2 years or something, we get, as planning continues to go along, we give them a window of opportunity and a percentage of something to deal with.
I don't think every 2 years is often enough.
Well,
It's going to be pretty much when they're ready to bid the project and they have enough of the design done.
So we either try to come across a universal percentage divvy up thingy, or we continue to deal with it on an individual project basis and make a one-time big change once they get final design and get ready to go out for bid, knowing there may be some minor changes along the way. But really, when they're ready for bid is when we're going to have our hands around scope and dollars at that point. And maybe I'm just concerned that there's some pretty big projects on here that could jump, several million or $10 million or so based on a percentage of the project. And so I don't know the right way either, but we need to do something so that we're dealing with a more accurate estimate of projects. And we don't want to raise expectations. We're going to get to the B list in 7.5 years when all of a sudden, as you say, the economy turns down or sales tax drop off. And so while that may have been planned number, I'm not focusing on B till we get to A.
Sure, it
And
has to be
we need to
total
spend
funding.
all the money we got that we have at the time to finish the A list.
Well, and you can't go on to the B list, not one B list item for any member government until the A list is totally funded. So you can't even really look at the funding being city versus county versus Manitou Springs funding. It's Pikes Peak RTA funding. And it's not in the bank yet anyway, so when we increase these numbers, it's not in the bank. Will it be? Probably. And we'll have to keep our eyes on that too, is the increases in cost, do we think that we're going to be able to cover them? We came super, super close on the A list for the first 10 years, considering the huge downturn in the economy we had. Of course, the contracts came in a lot lower too during that period. They were on a sharp increase, and then when the economy dived, we had the benefit of some very, very good contracts in our favor. So that sometimes can work out pretty well too. We're not paying big interest fees for bonds. We're not tied into anything like that. It's just a pay-as-you-go program. Other entities, other governments wish they had these problems, right? This is an opportunity, not a problem.
I think I remember some time ago, given my chronological giftedness, I might be wrong. Don't we also have to manage the problem of keeping the workers available? Our engineer at one time said part of the balance is keeping people here when they need to work the projects and their money. That must be folded into this in some way, I presume. So you don't just get it done real quick unless you've got projects to go to. Am I wrong on that?
No, it's good. So I don't know if you just want to discuss it some more. Mike can come up and talk about his projects. And Jennifer might want to talk about a couple of things. She's got some big things in the...
Well, just a real quick question. Something that you had mentioned going through is that there's probably some money still sitting out there in accounts that
In the initial A list, I would say that there will be.
recoverable.
Oh, it's recoverable. It's just that when we're trying to figure out whether you can go forward on the last two projects, which is basically South Mark Shuffle and North Mark Shuffle, how much is going to be available for North Mark Shuffle in the end?
Gotcha.
And we're not finished with South Mark Shuffle. It would be nice to know how much money is available for that. We have a
We
pool.
won't know that until the other projects are closed out, right?
completely closed out? I mean,
And that was going to be my question. So that answers it.
so we have a pool of 4,700,000 and almost 91,000. That's not a lot of money, but there's probably more money sprinkled in some of these projects, and we'll just keep shaking them until it falls out.
The other thing I wanted to mention is we have to also, because scope has been mentioned several times here, and we do have to be aware of keeping scope creep in our overview of these projects as they come before us, because there have been several projects over the years where, okay, we have a choice between, do we do the basic project as it needs to be done, or do we spruce it up a little bit? And we've had some energetic debates about various aesthetics and things like that. And I'm not anti-aesthetic. I'm just saying when one of the things that came up during those discussions was, look, we have a limited amount of resources, and we cannot count on having 7 or 8% above budget increases in funding, especially if, economic factors don't help. The GDP is only growing about 1%. So we've got to keep these things in mind long term, and it's very difficult to project. So when we're looking at project scopes that are being presented to us, I think it's important that we keep in mind the original project as it was approved by the voters in its general form versus when we start to see the engineering and the niceties and the details coming to us. It's a very difficult balancing act because the public obviously to a certain extent is entitled to be something that's going to be functional and aesthetically pleasing, but we also have to balance that between what we can afford versus what we have to accomplish.
Rep? Two things. You mentioned transparency and any transfers going from one project back and forth to take care of other projects. I would like to have a comment from both Mike and Jennifer as to how they think this could be accomplished. I like the idea that Jim's got, whether it's 2 years or 3 years, this is updated. But I'd like to give them some flexibility. They're sitting on top of a project that 4 years ago was $10 million. They're already pretty sure it's $12 million, and I'm picking numbers, folks. Don't tell me, don't ask me which project. But 2 years later, it could be back down to $8 million. I mean, it's the industry. We were able to project out pretty successfully 2 years in a row, from my aspect, the private industry, and could plan ahead. But they're in a different circumstance. They're literally thinking of what their particular needs are, what their citizenry, and I'm picking just the two largest. Green Mountain Falls, I'm still looking for the second street in that town, but seriously, I picked the two largest only because they would have the biggest impact, and if they have any suggestions how they may better serve your needs.
So one of the things too is to consider fairness to all the member governments. So and a way to figure out whether we can't just add money to projects and give approval for money that we're not going to have. It's true that we might not get to the B list, but we can't have it so that we don't have the money that we've promised for contracts.
But see, I don't see how we can make that decision until we know what the dollar value of what we're expected to build is. So if we don't have an updated goal, if we will, for our deal, then we really don't know how to divvy the money up. And so I think I like Reb's idea. These guys are in the business of making these estimates. They're the ones that have all the industry tools and all the knowledge of the engineering in the industry and doing this. And maybe let's hear from them and see what they propose.
Okay.
And then we can bat that around. But I'm not in favor of start divvying up money until we know what the total project projected cost is going to be. Then we could maybe make some educated, conservative forecast in terms of how to divvy up that extra revenue, but we don't know what our target is right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
if Mike and Jennifer want to, or anyone at contracting, or one of those guys want to give us some kind of idea, then.
Sounds good. I don't know who wants to go first. Mike or Jennifer?
Mike Chavis, City Engineering. I'll just give you just a quick briefing. So basically what I've been doing on our projects that we have underway, and we've got several extension projects that we are either bidding or designing. And what we had happen in 16 is the construction inflation kind of started hitting our projects, mainly the capital. And it's about 20%. CDOT in 14 and 15, when they were putting out their interchange projects, were getting hit with 20% increases above their estimates, and we were okay, but this year we kind of got hit. So Chestnut and Centennial reconstruction are hard bids. We got numbers, and they're quite a bit higher. We are also projecting on some of the other projects that I've got preliminary design going, just giving you guys an idea of, hey, we think this project's going to be much higher. Once you start designing it, you get a better idea of what it's really going to take. And it's not so much scope creep necessarily is always the case. It's kind of like the Chestnut Bridge. You got to replace the bridge. We thought it was going to be a $2 million project. When you get down to the nuts and bolts and the tight area and the details of how you actually build in that spot, the construction phasing and costs were much higher. So that the bridges is one type of project that's kind of hard. You can't cut back half a bridge to cut on scope. So that's a challenging part. So what we're finding is, just as we get into the details, there's more to these projects to get them done than we thought off the initial estimate. What I've done basically is we were pushed off a couple of projects. I pushed off a 17 project into 18, and then I borrowed the Pikes Peak construction money in 16 because I plan on replenishing it in 17. And so basically we just, we pushed some stuff off and used money that we weren't going to spend on certain projects. The problem is at some point that I can't do that. That's going to come to a head, and we're going to have to start figuring out how do we, allocate some money to these projects. I tend to like, let's kind of do it on a case-by-case basis instead of across the board, just because there's only so much money. One of the things I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get ahead on some of these other projects, get a little work done, and confirm the costs and get an idea, are we still good or are we way short, so that we can come to the boards with a plan.
But see, I see it as a two-step process. One is defining the requirement and updating the requirement. The second one is the allocation process. In the end, if it gets down to the fact that we don't have enough money to meet the new cost estimates for all the projects, then somebody's got to make a decision, because you don't want to downscope a project to where you have a less than effective fix to whatever you were trying to fix to begin with. And it's not one of those peanut butter spread things where you reduce all projects by 10% or whatever. It may come down to where you just cut a project in order to meet the ends, if the money doesn't match up. But you don't know how to do that until you know what your target is.
Yeah. Yes, and I would tend to think, or personally I would think I'd rather look at cutting a project or two as needed rather than trying to cut back on them, because one of the things the citizens don't want to see is what they consider as an incomplete project. And one of the big things that's been a little controversial is some of the larger city projects from the A-list had some landscaping, and we spent a decent amount of money. It wasn't exorbitant, but it was still a good piece. But during the public process, Awesome Blush Union interchange, it was very clear from the people who live there and drive through there, they wanted some aesthetic element to it, and we incorporated. And so that's why I say my preference would be is we would have to maybe stop a project too short rather than do something that people feel we didn't complete, because then that's going to play against us, or could play against us when we go for renewal.
Sure, yeah, and you can reduce a project by 1 lane mile and gain some money versus, not putting aesthetics in or not putting the right features in. So, but again, I've been in the requirements and resource allocation business most of my adult career, and so I got to know, before I can make a recommendation on how to allocate the funds, I got to know what I'm dealing with. And we're dealing with a 4-year-old estimate right now, and so we've got to figure out a policy or a process where, without increasing any funds allocation, some process by which we could recommend guidance on how we would like to see you update those projects, whether it's using an inflation factor that's an average of the last 2 years, or whether it's just update it and tell us what your best guess is for the ones that you're working on. And your planning cycle is what, 2 years, 18 months, 2 years out? In terms of updating your bids and getting ready to go out on stuff?
Well, I think we try to review yearly, what we think the projects
What's
are
coming up in the next year as you're putting your budget together and that kind of thing?
And that was what we did before, and that's something the city can do is whether I do it or Nolte. It doesn't take much time, but they would research trends and come up with an inflation, a construction inflation that they thought was coming in the next year, and we'd apply that. We can continue to do that.
But see,
Just to have a number now, how we use that number is.
right, in order for you to put together a viable budget, you got to know what the project costs are, and you got to know how much money you have available to you. And we can't make recommendations on how much money will be available to you until we really kind of know what you need. You don't know what you need because we don't have an updated project.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a.
Well, we can do that. Part of the process that we did before was we did have to sometimes push a project off a year because one that came online might have been above the estimate, so it needed more money. So we'd push one off, finish that, and then address it. So it's a combination of not only if there is extra revenue and allocating it, it's also how do we phase these to complete them.
But that's really shuffling money within your own allocation. It's not giving you more allocation. And so when you move a project from 2016 to 2017, that's a decision that you're making given your 2016 funds allocation.
Yes.
If there's more money available because of the revenue stream is higher, if we can prevent you from pushing that off by allocating more money to you because the revenue is there, or we reasonably expect the revenue to be there. So that it's kind of a.
No, and I'll take more money. But I'm saying it might be a combination of both, just to at the end, to get the A-list done.
Question.
Mike, you just gave us a figure. It looks like costs have gone up 20%. But this list has anywhere from roughly 50% to a 300% increase over the 2012 estimates.
Which are you talking about?
Just the list entirely. Pikes Peak Avenue went from 8.7 million to 13 million. The Las Vegas, I don't know why I thought this project was done.
The Las Vegas Royer?
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's still in the design phase, and the design's already up to your estimate of $5 million. Sounds, oh my word. Regardless, the emergency bridge fund is now supposed to be doubled. The Centennial Boulevard.
Well, that's yeah.
30% increase.
These are just kind of my estimates and the reasoning. We're not saying that this is going to happen, but I just wanted to kind of just present as accurate a picture of what I think may be needed.
Jennifer, you want to jump in? Oh, Jim, you had a call.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the observation that we don't want to overcomplicate this thing.
Right.
And what I'd really like to see is both the city and the county, like once a year, sit down and go through everything and say, this is sort of where we think we are. Because in the final analysis, all we're talking about is at what point will we finish the last A project and be able to move into the B projects. So that's really the only marker that all this is reflecting.
Or if we're going to finish the A list.
Well, okay, that's true too, but it's sort of the same question. So, anyway, let's don't make it too complicated.
I agree, I wholeheartedly agree. Brian, then Jennifer.
Just a hopefully a fairly simple, straightforward questions, and I understand this is a kind of a snapshot estimate. But on, and I know that Colorado Springs has the overwhelming amount of work to do on these projects. There's a huge amount of projects, and there's a lot of stuff. But Reb kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, we're seeing some of these that have got, 66% increase in 4 years. And yet, when I look at like El Paso County or Green Mountain Falls or even Manitou Springs, their estimates have actually decreased. And I'm kind of wondering why the disparity between, when you look at all the projects together, Colorado Springs is up about 3%, which seems like an inflationary factor, understandably. Yeah. But when I compare to the other member governments who are less than their original estimates, I'm kind of...
Are you looking at the
I'm looking at the percentages on the sheet here.
This, okay.
For example, you look at El Paso County is down from 28 to 25. You go to Manitou Springs, they've gone from 0.11 to 0.10. That was Green Mountain Falls. Manitou Springs has gone from 0.85 down to 0.78. So I'm just kind of wondering why the city has gone up 3% when we see most of them with the proposed estimates, the new proposed estimates have gone down.
Well, I guess, like on Manitou Springs, are you looking at, if you look at the revised and original, they're actually, there are, 20,000 more. Mm-hmm. That percentage is, I'm not sure.
Brian?
The percentage went down, but.
Are you looking at the percentage in red?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a percentage of the total.
Total, yeah.
Percentage of the total budget.
Is that the percentage of the total allocation?
Yeah, that's just the percentage of the total allocation, and they haven't revised their figures yet. So they haven't gone down or up. They just haven't stated that they're revising theirs yet. I'm sure that they will.
That's a percentage of the total pool.
Okay. So the original estimate on the Colorado Springs pool was 70.86%, and now it's 73.
If we got that, it would
Right.
be 73. But
Okay, gotcha.
If the proposed costs go up to $312 million,
Gotcha.
they would get a bigger chunk of that $312 million.
Okay.
Dr. Knoll had his hand up.
Yeah, a long time ago, we went through similar discussions. We resolved and supported the staff by saying, we're going to give you a lot of flexibility in your priorities. And we can't have it both ways. I don't think they're going to endanger one project by taking a huge chunk out of another one that's funded and put it over here. But I think we don't want to micromanage to the extent that they can't, what I call targets of opportunity, do occur. And I assume that's what we're really talking about here is, okay, we weren't going to do that, but we've got a little money in this pot, we're going to get it done. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
part of it.
That's all we're doing.
All right, Jennifer. Give us the county.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County County Engineer. Just want. I think this is a good conversation, and I think it's a good conversation to have earlier rather than later. And I think over the past 10 years, we've had some bumps in the road, but I think overall we've done well. I think one thing that we need to be careful about, from my perspective, is we've done a lot of line item transfers in the past, and I think that there's a difference between just moving money in and out of a project, and then there's also a difference between when we come to you and say, we're doing a line item transfer, but by the way, we're increasing the project budget by this much. And I think that that's one of the things that we really haven't done well in the past, is to really make you aware of when we're doing a line item transfer and saying, hey, we're going to go to construction, we need this line item transfer, but just to let you know, this is where we are, and so this is the delta. So that's, I think there's a difference between just simply a line item transfer and we're kind of moving money around, and then a line item transfer that actually we're definitely increasing the project budget. So that's one thing. So I think that maybe that's one thing that we really need to think about as we're doing it, as we come to you, is not only saying if it's a line item transfer, but saying specifically,
You're not getting it back.
yeah, so that you understand that there's an implication there. Another thing I would say is we really need to make sure that we keep our eye on the named projects. There's a lot of projects in here, but we also need to make sure that from a priority, our named projects are the most important ones. Not that some of those other things aren't important, but we really need to make sure that that's, priority. And then second thing is that, we talked a little bit, and you, Brian, mentioned a little bit about some of the beautification. And for the most part, a lot of our projects don't include a lot of those niceties. But what we also have to understand is on some projects, that's the purpose of the project, and understand that that project will create economic development, which will then, in turn, create a higher tax base. So I think, we have to balance that and be careful about that. What I will tell you is that our process, and the county's been consistent about this, and maybe that's something we need to change or do something different, but I've been comfortable with this process, is that we, the county, have not asked to increase the project budget until we know for sure that we need to do that. But on the other hand, what we're not doing is kind of give you an update as we go along, saying we're seeing this increase. And I can tell you there are some projects that we are going to see a significant increase. And some of those projects are a combination of things. And I think that's the other thing that we keep our eye on the ball, is that sometimes it's, based upon, we did our best estimating, so it will be under. It will be different. The costs have increased, and then time has gone by. So it's not just one thing that typically increases a project cost. It's a factor of many. And then thirdly, I would say that on some of our projects, we've also received some additional funds on some of those projects, whether that's in the first RTA. The city did a great job on that with the region, getting the Tiger Grant for Woodman. So I think that wasn't just a win for the region or the city. I mean, it was a win also for the PPRTA, because those dollars went somewhere else. So in that avenue, the county's gotten some federal grants on some of our projects that will complement some of these projects that we have on ours, specifically Highway 105 and South Academy. And I'm hoping that, that then, maybe some of those savings, if we realize some of that, knowing that, the project costs are increasing, but maybe there's some projects that we're actually going to decrease because of some of those federal dollars, and we're using our PPRTA money to leverage those. So, and then there's also some projects, I think, that have been overestimated. Unfortunately, from the county standpoint, I think that some of the projects that we have that we're doing earlier are probably the ones that are underestimated. And then, towards the latter part, some of these projects are overestimating. So as I've been preparing budgets, as my staff has been doing that, what we've been doing is not increasing our project budgets. So kind of summary, we've not been increasing our project budgets. What I've been doing is advancing the money to some of those projects quicker. And then knowing that if we have a project and it gets to construction, that's the time that I'm probably going to be asking for And I would call it probably at that point a budget increase, along as, and it may be a line item transfer as well. So, but in all, I think maybe something that we can do as member governments is, and we've doing this, but on the other hand, we've had a lot of external factors happen. Some of the fire floods, staff is stretched very thin at this point, and so we probably need to do a better job of meeting again like we used to, and talking about some of this and making sure that we're all on the same page. We were doing that. We still talk, but not as regularly as I think I'd like to, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just a matter of constrained time. So that's kind of what we've been doing. So I've been, just to be clear, I've been advancing money to projects quicker as we go along.
Tom?
Well, what we heard sort of is the two Jim's perspectives here. The Dr. Jim says we shouldn't micromanage, and the Jim chairman says we want to do more than just modulate the garden hose. And I think our role here is supposed to be a cooperative effort working with our member governments, and for that, we need information. Because Bev, more than anybody else, knows what the funding streams look like and everything. And the member governments benefit from knowing that, but it's also, our role here is to work and represent the citizens in this process. So I would tend to be more toward we need more information, we need to be more collaborative in our efforts here, without getting into their knickers on how to do it.
And I agree, and I think that you pointed at our role here to make a recommendation. And so it's really not about the dollar so much as it is the process. And what is an acceptable process that's not overburdening to the folks, that works for them, that gives us that information for us to formulate a recommendation to the board. It's really not our decision. And so it's that, how do we, before it was just you bring it in, you allocate some percentage increases of inflation. We haven't implemented that for the second 10. We could do that and just keep the process going the way we've done. But what would the city and the county or the member governments like about that process? They like that better? Or
I have a question. Since these are pretty old estimates, and then we'll have to see if this is possible to do this, and you're saying, I'm hearing you need more information, that these estimates are so old. Is it possible for the member governments to go back like they did at the beginning and update these estimates to the best of their ability?
Kathleen Krager, City of Colorado Springs. Mike may want to step in on this, but I'm going to warn you that, especially when we're in a form of tax and government here where we aren't allowed to have any city staff that is paid by PPRTA, to ask us to redo these estimates before they go out to bid, we could do it. They would probably be increased based on the 20% inflation that we've seen recently, but they won't necessarily be any more accurate until we get into design and then go to bid. And that's just always going to be the case. I do want to point out that as our watchdog group when it comes to budgets, I think it's very important for CAC to deal with facts and not with long-held beliefs or political misconceptions. So I wanted to point out there was a statement made that the county always turns projects in under budget and the city always turns projects in over budget. So I want to make sure that you look at this handout and see that on the original cost estimates versus what we've spent as of 2016, that the county has increased their spending by, let me see, that's $51 million, where the city, who should have over double the projects, increased their spending by $41 million. So no, let's stop that. I don't want to hear it again, at least not when I'm in the room, because that's simply untrue. And we need to be more consistent about this. We also need to point out the fact that if you want to look at the percentages under that, that shows the percentage of the total PPRTA tax spent. The county has approximately 29% of the population that pays into this tax, and the city has approximately 70%, with 1% going to the other jurisdictions. But yet, in those first 11 years, we spent 37% in the county and just over 60% in the city. This is why the city was very adamant that in PPRTA 2, we need to split our budgets based on our jurisdictions. Okay, thank you.
Just as part of the history lesson, again, going back to the rainbow spreadsheet, when this was devised as to the projects in each of the member governments, it's only a managed by, so they take the lead on it. It's not that these projects reside wholly in the city and county. Mark Shuffle Road, both, especially north and south, a lot of it is in the city. So these dollar amounts don't mean that the county got the benefit of these dollars. The region, the citizens got the benefit. Roads go in and out of the county and the city. So those percentages don't mean what you think they mean by where they're categorized on this sheet. Another thing is that the ARA money came into the Woodman Academy intersection project, and it was huge, and it benefited the RTA. Was it like 19 million? 35. Oh, but 19 million was how much I think we were able to transfer out of the Woodman Road. Yeah, so 35, but 19 million we transferred out of Woodman Road and sprinkled it to other projects in the RTA. It was a huge win for all the RTA projects. So because there was an issue with the prior mayor about whether the city was getting their fair share on the first rainbow spreadsheet, when the member governments got together and devised this next group of A-list projects, they tried to do it by, they estimated all their projects and then tried to divvy up how much each of the member governments would do based on the decennial census percentage. But it isn't until the B list that the RTA is required through the change in the intergovernmental agreement to allocate funds according to the decennial census for capital. They're still required to allocate funds according to the decennial census for maintenance. That's always been the case. But capital is on a project-by-project basis. So when I was talking about fairness, I was talking generally, not really worrying about whether somebody gets a little bit more for the projects they manage, because it's still very much the case that some of these projects that are in the county and in the city, they're in both. But they did it a little different for this group of projects, the renewal projects. They took Colorado Avenue, West Colorado Avenue, and split it between county, city, and Manitou Springs. Now, there's going to be some funding from CDOT that comes into that also, I believe. So, and that's, Jennifer referred to, funding coming in from other sources. Yep. So it's kind of a little complicated, and we don't really need to get into that part of it. But the percentages, they just tried to come up with a fairness thing, and just generally fair, not specifically on every single project and down to the last detail,
Well,
but
yeah,
just
'cause
generally.
South Academy was a huge win, and that was a combined project.
There's a lot of combined projects. So, I mean, all in all, I think that the first A-list really speaks for itself. It just was done very nicely. All the projects were mostly finished. The ones that aren't as, the scope isn't maybe as big as you might have thought to begin with. Part of the reason is there wasn't growth in that area compared to what was originally envisioned when the list was put together. So
of changes.
a lot of good things happen there, and
So let's,
just discuss what you think you might want to do.
I don't care who has the project and where it resides. That is the least of my worries, because as you said, it's a regional thing, and that's what it's all about. Let's, would a suggestion to update your projects for the upcoming year, would a good time to do that would be during your budget submission? Are you within your planning numbers or range without a lot of extra staff time? Is that an appropriate time to maybe provide an update for all the projects in the upcoming year that you're submitting the budget?
Yeah, I think we need to do that.
I mean, but we don't have to make the decision today. We can chew on this, and maybe we just allocate about a 15-minute or so period of time for the next meeting, kind of mull on this, and would updating it, their project cost, their estimates, would the appropriate time be during the budget submission time? And would that give us enough number? It would give us a number for the upcoming year, and if they are further along in the planning of a larger project that they know, they could update us at that time too. Does that make sense, Dr. Hull?
Yeah, I think it does. My memory isn't as good as it used to be, as I've said, but we've always said you need to take advantage of targets of opportunity. And so we know the list and what it generally is. Doesn't mean they can't say, well, we can do this now if we get this. I think we want them to do that. Otherwise, we're micromanaging their project list, and we don't want to do that. So I don't want it conveyed that somehow we want to know everything you're funding just before you do it and get an approval. And so I'm trying to argue for the maximum flexibility for them to do this, because we don't know what we're talking about on a lot of these. We might know our neighborhood, but we don't know out there. And so I don't want it to sound like we don't want you doing those targets of opportunity when they come up. It may mean this project gets put off, but we're not here to tell them when to do the project as a general rule, just to give input. So,
Right, and my logic there was that is by having an update during that period of time, it's kind of in line with where Bev does the reallocation for the new revenue based on excess money that we've come in. She's making that reallocation, if there is any additional allocation at that point, and it can be planned into the budget process and the approval process, and we can discuss all of it in one budget cycle. It just seems to fit there. That's my opinion, but Tom, you had your hand.
It strikes me that during your budget cycle, you probably noticed that the inflation rates are not the same on all types of projects. Different materials make up different things. But those would give you general guidance on what, if a bridge is seeing an 18% increase, then probably most other bridges would see that. But a paving project may not have that same inflation rate. So at least it's a notional guidance that you can start to give us better fine tuning.
She could put something in the budget guidance that says for a planning factor, use this, or, I mean, that's a possibility too, so. Well, let's, one last comment and then we'll move on.
Real quick, too, one of the things that we did really well as a group within the first 10 years was when city or county or anybody came to us and said, hey, we've got an opportunity to leverage some money and actually get a grant or whatever like that. We've been pretty good as a group at being able to evaluate that on the fly and pass along good recommendations, and they've done a really good job at leveraging that kind of money. I don't think anybody here is looking to pigeonhole anybody. But I also think it's reasonable that when we know the inflational pressures are roughly falling in the 15 to 20% range and we see a 66% increase on a large project, it's reasonable to ask, can you detail that for us, why we're seeing that, just generally, than, actually getting into the weeds.
Okay. Clarification.
This calls for recommendations. This is voted with a recommendation.
Possible recommendation.
Yeah, there's no way.
Well, basically, maybe I'll just have a memo that states that you want the member governments to look for the board, that you want the member governments to look at this through the planning process for the next budget and come up with, or maybe I won't get any more detailed than that.
We say we postpone formulating a recommendation for further discussion at the next meeting.
In the next 15 minutes.
Okay.
Next meeting,
Okay.
15 minutes, we decide how to work it.
Okay, that sounds great. So no recommendation at this
No
time.
recommendation. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. All right, item number 6, capital maintenance and public transportation contracts. City of Colorado Springs.
The book.
The book.
Mike Chavez, City Engineering again. We're going to do this real quick. First of all, each contract has a second page that had, it's the same for all these contracts. There was some things that were left in there that we need to fix, and we're going to submit corrected versions to the board. But basically, if you turn to the second page of any one of these on-call, it's supposed to be only on-call design services, so that stormwater is going to get taken out. That was left over from last month's stormwater ones. The project category, we're going to X all of them because any of the capital, maintenance, or transit could use these. And then we're going to, the task order amount is going to be changed to $200,000 because I'm dealing with RTA. That's what we're requesting. And then the other stuff will be blank because we don't know, any and all project account numbers could be used depending on what we do. So that'll be corrected. So basically, this last month, the city is kind of revised the way they do their engineering on-call. We had an RFP process where people could submit on their area specialty or two, and we selected a list of 35 consultants that we're going to have on-call to do work. With task order limits for city funds or other funds of $500,000 per task order, and we are requesting that the RTA approve these contracts to be used when needed on RTA projects with a task order limit of $200,000. Now, I took that, the stormwater ones I took to the board, and they didn't like the fact that they said stormwater, so we decided to pull it. But the board did indicate that they didn't really have an issue with the $200,000 limit. They just didn't like the fact that the contract said stormwater. So are there any questions on this?
No. He ran away.
Any questions for Mike?
I don't think on that one.
All right.
And then there was one separate item. It's a change order for CP&Y for the Academy over Cottonwood Creek Bridge. And what we're doing there is they started doing some initial work, design, and they put together a cost estimate, which, again, is higher than what we have. So what we are having them do with this change order is we're going to have them get a general contractor on board. We're going to do this project with a construction manager, general contractor at the CMGC. And what that does is it allows the consultant to bring a contractor on board to help them with constructability, with options on how do we get this project. We're thinking that we'll be able to get some options, some ideas on how we can maybe get this project designed and built as inexpensively as possible.
Is this the one you're doing in conjunction with Parks over the trail there?
Yes.
Is that design?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And that's item number 36, right?
Yes.
I move that these cities contracts be buyer completed for the, let's take it separately. The design construct, up to the design construct contract, have specific wording with it, and the other city issue, the one for, who is it, Y and
CP&Y.
CP&Y. Be approved as accepted, or accepted and approved as presented. And the if I haven't got the right quantity, whether it's 27 items, the first group of items. 35. The first 35 items be approved, subject to the
36.
statement that Mike made that they are approved with the
Amendments?
the amendments as approved. Did you want me to rephrase that?
Yeah, would you please?
Yeah, because I'm not certain what you said.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I'll try again. Items 1 through 35 are approved as pending amended to the board. As Mike
Removing the
presented
word
them.
stormwater.
What?
Are you saying the revision removing the word stormwater?
We're, not just that, 200,000 instead of $500,000
And
task force.
all project categories checked.
And all three categories. Well,
Thank you.
And I gave Rick that version already. He's
You
got
already
it.
got it,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Okay, so by bifurcating, there are no exceptions to item 36. The exceptions are as noted on items 1 through 35.
So basically, items 1 through 35, recommended approval as amended by Mike. Item 36 stands approved alone.
Right.
I will second that.
Second.
So we got a motion and a second, and any discussion?
I have one question. I'm just picking one of the vendors out of here as an example, AMAC Foster. $2 million contract, or $3 million per year per contract. How many contracts can you have with AMAC during this period?
Which one are you looking at?
Be one.
So they're letting one contract and then just having, if I understand it, Mike, you have several dollar thresholds on task orders depending on who's funding. RTA is 200,000 and city would be 300,000 or.
So, yeah. So basically, they have a contract, and they can do a variety of disciplines, but once they hit $3 million per year, they're capped.
Okay. That answer your question?
It answers it, I just don't like the wording, because to me it seems ambiguous.
Does the 3 million include the city portion or just the PPRTA portion?
It's total.
Okay.
So if they.
Cumulative.
So I can't give them $3 million RTA work and $3 million city. Is when they hit $3 million, they're done.
Yeah.
Jake, you had a question?
I do, on all these, it says, there's 4 option years. And I understand that, but I just want clarification that we'll come back to PPRTA.
Yes, whenever we have a renewal, if there's RTA money involved, we come back for
Yep.
authorization.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call for question. All those in favor of the motion that's made?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you very much.
Hey, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
That's great.
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County. I just have one item for contracts, and this is for our Mark Shuffle South project. It's a utility reimbursement for Lower Fountain Sewage Disposal District. It has to do with some relocation of some of their utilities. They're in an easement and on our existing right-of-way, so we have to address that and also adjust the manhole lids. So $36,723.
Why do they always put manholes, not in the center of the road, but right where your tires go, right in the track lane?
Thump, 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 thump.
I mean, when you design the road, if the sewer's already there and you build a road, why can't you build it 2 feet further to the left? So every tire bump doesn't
Wait a
hit
minute.
every manhole in the road.
So we know that Jim is gonna.
Within that 2 feet.
We know that Jim Godfrey's gonna be driving there, and dang it, we're gonna do that way on purpose. So.
If I may, I want to thank you for the amount of information. It actually answered most of my questions. So I would like to move that we recommend approval to the board of this item.
Second.
We have a motion by Brian, a second by Reb.
Sure.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
How much extra do I have to get you in to make sure those are? It's tight with those
It seems every
We'll take donations, Reb.
Move them over, then you
stripes are over them, and that means that they turn the manhole, the stripes go sideways.
Yeah, they do that on purpose.
Jim, you didn't get an answer. I presume your question was rhetorical?
Yeah. It was big government answering, yeah. All right. Member governments, oh, wait, I'm sorry. We have, member governments and other reports. City transit. Did you want to do that?
You don't like it.
Good afternoon. Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metropolitan Transit. I just wanted to brief you on our monthly transit report. For our fixed route transit services, we've seen an increase of almost 4% for June of this year as compared to June of 2015. For our ADA power transit services, there's been almost a 3.5% increase in ridership during the same time period. Our van pool services show a 26% decrease from this June to last June. And I believe last month I reported that, we kind of think it's gas price related, and but I dug a little bit deeper, and our folks that manage or coordinate the program said there's a number of things going on. One, it is a warmer season. Gas prices are low. Warmer season, people tend to want to drive themselves when bad weather starts to come, like toward this winter. We might,
Take public
yeah, we might see an increase in our van pool ridership because people would rather not drive in poor weather. But there's also some things going on. There was a transfer of job locations for a couple of our shuttles that go to some VA facilities and Buckley Air Force Base. There was some movement of folks on those van pools. Redstone College has a high rate of turnover with some time changes and shift changes and a lack of drivers. So there's a bunch of things going on there all at once. But yeah, it's quite an increase, and it's been consistently tracking downward over the last several months, but hopefully that'll pick up. Couple project updates. The downtown transit station relocation study is continuing. I reported that we started with about 30 sites that our consultant team identified. Out of the level 1 screening, we ended up with about 12. Right now they're finalizing the level 2 screening, which will leave us with about 5 sites. And those 5 sites will be released very soon. We'll also have 2 more technical advisory group meetings and 2 more stakeholder advisory group meetings and another open house all in this month and in September. So it's moving along very rapidly, and there's a lot of good work being done. And those 5 sites will then be analyzed at a higher level, and then they'll go through a level 3 screening, which will leave us with 1 or 2 sites that we hope are our preferred alternatives. So look forward to more updates on that. Our fall 2016 service changes have been finalized. If you'll allow me, I have a few things to share with you. We released our fall 2016 service change proposal in June. Those changes are grouped into 3 categories: service increases, some minor scheduling modifications, and a few route modifications. And the service increases, we're looking to add service on Route 4, which goes from the downtown terminal out to the Broadmoor area, add weekday evening and Sunday service. So we'll have Sunday service out along the A Street corridor down by Walmart, which is a good thing. We've been getting a lot of comments for more off-peak service like that. Route 39 service that goes from the Eagle Rock Transfer Center across from University Village Shopping Center up to the Voyager Parkway Transfer Center up by Chapel Hills Mall. That will be getting Saturday service.
That goes by corporate drive?
Exactly. Yep. So there's a lot of call centers in that corporate drive, Mark Dabbling area. So that will be some welcome improvement right there. And also increased Saturday frequency on Route 7 and 27 from 60 minutes to 30 minutes. So that's Route 7 goes from downtown out to the Citadel on Pikes Peak, and 27 is the lower portion of our Academy corridor route. Scheduling modifications, these are some things that we heard from our customers as a result of our spring changes. Ways to maybe add a trip, start a trip earlier or later to try to make those connections work a little bit better. So these are things that won't really be noticed, except they'll be noticed by our riders, and the benefits will be great there. Routing modifications. Again, we heard something from some of our customers on the east side of downtown, particularly the Centennial Plaza senior housing facility. We are going to reroute Route 5 as it enters and leaves the downtown terminal. Currently, it comes on Weber. We're going to move it a block east to Wasatch. That will allow them a shorter walk from the senior housing facility. There was also a kind of a grade as they'd have to walk up to Weber. So this will make some good improvements for them. And we held, and then of course there's the how we operate through the Old North End neighborhood. We proposed two alternatives. One is to take one of the two routes off of North Nevada and move one of them to Weber, one block east. And the Old North End neighborhood proposal was to spread them out to go back to where we were on Cascade and Wasatch. So we had 3 public meetings, 2 on July 12th and 1 on July 14th. We had about a little over 70 people attend all 3 of those. One was at the Independence Center, one was at Library 21C, and the final one was at City Hall Council Chambers. So aside from the comments received there, we got about 100 comments in through email, fax, phone, letter to our customer service folks. We received a petition from the Old North End neighborhood with 207 signatures, all recommending alternative 2, which is Cascade and Wasatch. We also received a petition from the Community Transit Coalition with 235 signatures. 73% of those signatures come from current transit riders, and they recommended alternative 1, so the Cascade Weber option. So based on the public process that we conducted and the comments received, the overall transit system productivity improvements and service enhancements, the benefits to the community and to the riding public, our operational requirements and our overall objectives, our decision was to implement the entire package of improvements identified in the proposal, and to also select alternative 1, the operation through the Old North End on Nevada and Weber. And we've received support from the Public Works Director and the Mayor's office, so this is what we're implementing. We announced this decision yesterday at CTAB, and we'll start to roll this out to the public. And our effective date is Sunday, September 18th. So look for more on that. And just to kind of and to kind of back all of this up, we believe this recommendation incorporates and achieves a significant balance between meeting the needs of the riding public and the transit system as a whole by effectively maintaining that 15-minute transit corridor with just one block of separation. But it also addresses the concerns of the Old North End neighborhood and shows that we're being sensitive to neighborhood impacts. And there's been a fair amount of compromise on our parts because we instituted the 15-minute service on Nevada Avenue, both routes on Nevada Avenue, because we felt it was the demand and the best thing to do to grow our system and improve it. But so we compromised, and we still believe that this Weber, Nevada option will work very well. And retaining transit service on North Nevada is also desired from a transit operations perspective, as this corridor is the most direct routing from downtown to the areas north of the Old North End neighborhood. And it's this directness, the same reason that 17 or 18,000 trips per day are made on Nevada Avenue. It's the most direct route to get from those two places.
And there's a hospital there.
Right. Yep. And on-time performance and system reliability are two of our key productivity components, two keys to improving that quality transit service. And it's very important to improve the service for our existing customers and to attract new riders. So that's where we're coming from, and we thank you all for your support and look for more change to come.
Brian?
Yeah. Just real quick, I want to commend you guys again. Over the years, I've had a tremendous amount of. I've been very impressed and got a lot of respect for what you guys at Mountain Metro have been able to accomplish with the resources. Quite often, very limited resources that you have in serving the public. I think what went on with this whole thing with the North End and trying to compromise and figure out what was going to work best for everybody involved is a perfect example of how professionally you guys handle situations like this in dealing with the public, and I can say nothing higher. You need to let all of your people over there know that the public in general, from what I've heard back, you got a lot of support, and they think this was a really good, very well handled.
Good.
So
thank you very
kudos.
much. Thank you.
I'd just like to observe once again the matter of those who are chronologically gifted here. We had a hell of a time getting a bus system passed, and you were here then, weren't you? When we pushed it through for the first time?
Service on Nevada Avenue?
Yeah.
Just this spring? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yes, I was here. Yeah.
So it's done well since then.
Yeah. Thanks.
Brian, I'm looking at your van pool numbers here, and I'm beginning to see a trend. In your field of expertise, is there a point where you reach a tipping point where you start adjusting your capacities based on trends? I'm not trying to say we need to get into that discussion, but for information purposes, is there?
Right. Yeah. Well, this has trended both ways over the years. We've tried to, adjust the size of our vehicles. We did have larger Ford Econoline vans, which we thought would meet that demand. We found that folks preferred the smaller Toyota Sienna vans, so we've tried to adjust the size of our fleet and the type of vehicle. And we've just tried to keep up with demand. And this is a program that is funded primarily through a federal congestion mitigation air quality grant, which is going to be going away after 2018 is the last year that we have funding for it. So we're going to have to address, how to approach this, and maybe it's, on a smaller scale, but it is something that we're going to have to address. And but like I said, the numbers have gone up and down. They've cycled depending on the seasons and even the year. So it's something we're trying to monitor. We're really still trying to market these because for some applications they don't work, but for some they really do. And with the military installations, we're really trying to push them because it's kind of been proven that fixed route service to Fort Carson and Peterson and Schriever and the Air Force Academy, it isn't working. And actually, this is a good point. We just were contacted by folks from Schriever about a Peterson-Schriever van pool. So we're hopeful that something there will pick up because, at the PPACG board, a few of the colonels have mentioned, the need with airmen traveling on Highway 94 and the safety issues and all of that, but it's so far removed from our existing fixed route services. It's just not cost effective for us to travel there, but that's what we've been pushing is the van pool service. So hopefully that will work out and could maybe be the spike that we need to improve these numbers. Thank you.
Brian, I got one comment that doesn't have anything to do with your report. But driving around town with my students, is there any plan by your outstanding public relations group to publicize that new public law, or that new law about yielding to the buses? If not, would you maybe consider that?
Yeah, I know we did a big push once the ordinance went into effect earlier this year, and I'll mention that, see if it's worthy of another bump.
Sure what
Yeah.
we're talking about. The new buses that they got have a yellow sticker on them, but that has a flashing light with an arrow, red arrow. The new law says that if you see that flashing, you've got to yield to the bus and let them out. There's 0.9% of the people know about that.
Yeah.
And the other 0.9 don't do anything about it, even if they might know about it. So,
And you can
Okay,
sometimes
yeah.
see the frustration with the bus drivers because they will,
ease out there.
oh yeah, they have been doing that. It puts them in a very difficult position.
One comment
Okay.
on that?
Brian, I think it's your PIO needs to make it a regular thing for a while until you get used to it. The public's memory is very short. Sometimes it isn't. You can't even get out in your vehicle before you forgot that you're supposed to let the bus out that's in front of your house or something.
Right.
Yeah, I made my small contribution. I pointed out to my wife that when the bus is coming out, she needs to let them out.
I do it with all my students too.
That was not well received by my wife.
And my wife likes the fact that I'm a driving instructor now, and she is not my student.
Mercy, Sister Madge, you're never too old to learn from your wife.
Thank you.
I don't take lessons well, so don't look at me.
I just had my 50th anniversary, and I second that.
Congratulations, 50 years.
I'm celebrating 225s. Is that the same?
Yes. All right, any other questions, Brian? Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
El Paso County monthly change order and property acquisition review.
I think we're almost to the end of our property acquisition for Mark Shuffle, which is good because we're well underway with the project, but
Bargaining position a little more awkward?
no. Just one single acquisition this month. It's for permanent easement and temporary easement on the Colorado Springs Land Associates, and we did an appraisal, $25,563, and they accepted our amount. So that's all the report.
How many thousand acres?
20,000 Reb. I'd have to look. I don't have that number with me.
That easement is active, so the road has been moved, typically.
Yeah, typically, when we do permanent easements, temporary easements are easements that are just over the land, and we just use them for the construction or access, and then they go away. Permanent easement could be, there's a drainage swale or a drainage way adjacent to the road, and we don't need permanent fee simple right away, and it's cheaper, less expensive, and so we just get an easement. So I'd have to look specifically at this location. I don't know for sure, but typically when we do a road, we want the road fee simple from a standpoint of maintenance, and we.
So permanent easement just allows you to maintain off-site structure.
Correct. Oh, yeah.
Any questions, Jim? Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
All right. Administrative actions, any comments, questions for Rick on the report of board actions? Seeing none. Agenda items, agenda topics for next meeting. Rick, let's add the discussion on the budget updates or project cost updates, whatever.
Rolling over Bev's item?
Yes.
Sure.
Agenda item, Bev stuff.
That stuff. Any communications by any of the members?
The city is working hard on Olympic City USA. We have a huge event Friday night. I would encourage all of you to come, let your spheres of influence know. Cirque du Soleil is coming. We have dancers coming from across the United States. So it should be something that will be amazing. And I think because Colorado Springs is now Olympic City USA, we can use that moniker. It is hugely important as we move forward with anything that has to do with certainly economic development and certainly the availability for citizens to own what it is to undergird the 54 athletes we have coming from the city to Rio.
And
So we
where
hope
is
to
it?
see you all there. It's
Where?
downtown.
Where?
Downtown, Friday night.
Hopefully they don't put their heads under the water.
From
while they're
about,
doing
I don't know what the cross street is, all downtown.
it. Yeah, don't get their
You
butts.
can't miss it.
7, start at what time?
Well, 5-ish.
5-ish.
Oh, and one more thing. I'm in charge of all the honkin' waves throughout the city, so if, when you are driving around tomorrow and Friday and you see people on the street corners,
Honk.
please be nice and honk to them because they're probably not going to take any of my phone calls ever again. And we'd like to know that they're appreciated.
Leave them with a good impression, huh?
Yeah, I have 12, so good
I'm
numbers.
glad
Yes,
I'm
thank you.
leaving the city tonight.
Sorry?
All right, Rick?
Well, I'd like to tell everybody that I've had a great time serving on this committee. It's been a privilege, an honor, and it's been fun. And it's been a very learning experience for me. I'm going to miss it, and hope that maybe someday I can join it again.
No, we're going to miss your input and your expertise.
Yes,
When are you leaving?
you will be
This
missed.
is my last meeting.
I don't understand.
Does that sound for you,
Have they
Jim?
get our permission?
I thought my last meeting would be next month.
According to it yesterday, it was today.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
So I'm off.
yeah.
Oh, boy.
I have enjoyed it too, and it really has been an honor and has been a privilege. And I've learned an enormous amount and met a lot of nice people. And
A few of us old farts that aren't so good.
Well, I would,
So is this the entire CDAP that's going?
no.
Just two?
Steve Murray is still on.
Oh, Steve is still on.
Our vacancies that CTAB
They've already been filled.
will bring bigger and better people, nicer people.
I would encourage you both, I would say the short period of time that I've been on, I've enjoyed your input as well. I would encourage you both to watch for at-large vacancies, that if you still would like to serve, there'll be some at-large vacancies there. So we consider that. We'd love to have you rejoin us.
Or they can go talk to Rama, Green Mountain Falls, and Manitou, because they each have openings. Green Mountain Falls, that can be fun.
All
Speaking
right.
from somebody who used to represent.
Any other comments, communications, meeting adjourned?
Bye.
So we got fired last night.